Welcome to our third installment of the Oracle EBS Project Management series. Today we're going to be talking about generating and editing budgets. So the topics that we're going to be covering today include the introduction to EBS project budgets, and then we're going to talk about the budget generation options, and then we're going to finish up with how to maintain your budget versions in Oracle EBS projects. So let's start by looking at an introduction to Oracle EBS project budgets. A budget or forecast is simply an estimate of your financial performance throughout the project lifecycle. In the next episode, we're going to cover forecasting, so let's take a look first at the budgeting process in this episode. We spoke in a prior video about how you create your project, so now we're going to talk about the budget creation options that are available when you're creating your initial budget for a project. So you have several options. You can generate your budget, you can direct edit it, or you can copy amounts from previous budgets. So we'll look at those in a little more detail. But once you've created your first budget, then you could go through the update process. So you can make adjustments to it, recalculate the budget, and make the changes so that you're happy with your initial budget. Once you are, you would baseline that budget, and that would now be your starting point for your project financial plan. It would also create an initial forecast once you baseline the budget, since your initial baseline is your initial forecast as well. As you go through the process of executing on your project, you continually adjust it and recalculate, and you can also implement change documents, which we will cover in a future episode. But as you make changes to the project and client approvals come in, that would also be impacted into your budget and will revise your baseline. And then you would republish those. So it's an iterative process that we continue to go through as you update your budgets. The next part to understand is plan types and plan versions. To define your budget or forecast, you add a plan type to your project, and a plan type is essentially a type of plan. So it could be your cost budget, it could be a revenue budget, it could be a forecast, or it could be a bid proposal. And then for each of your plan types, you add a plan version to identify a specific planning instance or scenario for. Before we go on and demonstrate generating a budget, I want to talk about the budget creation options a little bit more. So we have a lot of flexibility in Oracle Project Management on how you create your budget. Generation is probably one of the easiest ways to create your budget. So you leverage the work you've done in, say, a staffing plan when you already know what resources you're going to use, or you can generate it from a work plan where you know the tasks and the resources, or optionally you can also use another financial plan, whether it's a budget or a forecast. And of course we also offer the option to do a direct edit, so essentially you're just manually entering your budget, or copy amounts so that if you have another plan version that you want to use, you can copy the amounts from that and use that to create your budget. So I'm going to go through the steps in the interest of time just to create a budget from a staffing plan and a work plan. So in the first scenario, I'm going to be using a staffing plan only to build my budget. So I've got a very simple bid proposal to do here. I've got three labor resources, a business analyst, a consultant, and a DBA. I know they're on my project. I don't really have any tasks created, but you can see here are my resources I've assigned to the project and the amount of time for each of those, 80, 240, and 80 hours respectively. So let's go and have a look at the resource list, or the team roles that we've created. This is essentially our staffing plan of what we're planning to assign to this project. And this is what we're going to be using to build our first budget. So let's go to the financial tab now to build that budget. And as you can see, I'm going to be building a plan type of estimate. So that's my first plan type I want. So I'm going to create a version first. So we're just going to call this one staffing estimate. This is my first version for it. And then after I fill that in, what I'm going to be doing is looking at the generation options, or the planning options for building our budget. So what you can see here are the different amounts that I can enter, quantity, whether it's raw or cost, burden rates, costs. Also, I've got my resource breakdown structure selected, and then what level I'm planning at. Since I'm not doing detailed tasks, I'm just planning at the project level at this point. I'm also not going to be doing any multi-currency, so we'll skip that. I do want to leverage our rate schedule, so this allows us to use rates that are already predefined for these specific roles, and I'm going to be using some burdening as well. So I'm going to add my burden schedule. And then for generation options, this is where you can see my different abilities to use a financial plan, a staffing plan, or a work plan. So we're going to use work staffing plan in this case, and I'm not using any other change documents or open commitments. So once I save that, now I'm ready to create my first version of my budget, which is we call our working version. So I'm going to go to my generate budget. I'm going to run that, and quickly you can see it's generated my budget lines for these resources. And if I want to adjust it now, I can easily do that. You can see I've added my planning rates, so it's calculated it based on the amounts for each person. Let's say I want to make adjustments to one or more lines now. That's easy to do. I can adjust any of the fields. Let's say I want to do a 100% increase on one of the tasks. So I would just add 100%, quick update, and you see my first line has gone from 80 hours. So that illustrates how you can quickly create a budget when you don't always know who your resources are, and maybe even the time frames that they'll be on a project. In this next demonstration, what I'm going to be showing instead is when we do have a detailed plan. We know the dates that we have our resources assigned, and in this case, I'm actually going to be selecting some particular resources that I know have been assigned to the project as well. So I have Ann Hamilton working on a couple of tasks and Emily Heather working on a task as well. So again, based on the amount of time that we've assigned them, and I know the rates that are associated with them, I can already see what my costs are going to be. And now I'm going to go build my budget from that work plan. So in this case, I'm going to add a new plan type. Before it was my estimate based on my staffing plan. Now I'm going to be doing an approved cost budget, and I'm only going to be worrying about the cost side, no revenue. So again, we're going to go look at our planning options like we did before. It's same things. We're now looking though at the lowest level of tasks to build our budget rather than the higher level when we're just doing the estimate. And again, I'm going to be using the planning rates, so I'm going to be putting in my burden schedule, and we're going to use that. And then now when I go to my generation options, instead of staffing plan, I'm going to be picking my work plan resources. And then I decide which work plan I'm going to be using. So it's going to be my current working version, and I'm not including any commitments at this point either. Once I apply those, I now see I've created that approved cost budget, and now what I need to do is create a version of that. So I'll just create a version here. So I'm going to call this budget 1, and then we're going to generate our budget based on the work plan. So after a quick process, now you can see, based on the resources that I've assigned to each of my work plan tasks and the rates associated to those resources, I've now got my budget created from the work I've done on the work breakdown structure. The final piece we'll cover today is quickly, how do you maintain your budgets going forward as you work through your project? So we talk about maintaining our versions. So I've created a working copy of our budget, but I would need to submit that for a baseline. If I had workflow turned on, when I choose the submit button here, it would go to someone for approval. I don't have workflow, so I can quickly submit it, and then I have the option to create the baseline, so I do that. So now we've decided what's our budget that everyone is working off of. And now I can go and make changes to my working versions as well, and they don't affect the baseline until I resubmit it and then rebaseline it as changes happen to the project. So that wraps up our brief introduction into the Oracle EBS project budgeting process. Be sure to stay tuned for our future upcoming episodes. We're going to be looking at forecasts, we're going to be looking at project change management, and then we'll have some other future sessions coming up about reporting options, resource management, and project billing.